What basically started it was his first restoration he did by himself back in 1958. He paid $500 for it and thought he could fix it up in 6 weeks for $5,000. It ended up taking 18 months and $65,000 back in 1958. But when he completed the restoration, him and my great-grandmother Dorothy hopped in it and drove it up to Monterey from Santa Monica and won Pebble Beach Best of Show. And from then it just turned into a passion, an obsession, a lifestyle.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Horsepower Heritage. I'm Maurice Merrick, and greetings to all of you listening from places like Andover, Massachusetts, Telluride, Colorado, Carlsbad, California, Guelph, Ontario, Canada, Malmo, Sweden, and Barcelona, Spain. Thanks for joining me once again, and this time around I'm going to take you inside one of the most prestigious car collections in the United States, and it's also one of the oldest. Now, many high-end collections of this type are private and even secretive, and often you can't take photos of the cars, and I've been in a few of those collections, and it's really tempting, but the owners just want to keep it under wraps. But this one is not only accessible to the general public, but you can also book a personal guided tour. I'm talking about the Nethercutt Collection in Sylmar, California. It was established by JB Nethercutt in the 1950s, and together with his wife Dorothy, JB rescued and restored hundreds of cars, starting from the earliest days of motoring up through the 1960s. But what JB loved most were America's great luxury marques, names like Packard, Pierce Arrow, and Duesenberg. And he wasn't interested in just keeping the cars tucked away either. They all got used on a regular basis and shared with other enthusiasts. And my guest today is carrying on the family tradition. Cameron Richards is the vice president and curator of the Nethercutt Collection. And as a matter of fact, he's been a regular guest on Jay Leno's Garage. You may have seen some of those videos. And of course, I have too, and I really enjoy what Jay does. So naturally, I was pretty excited to sit down with Cameron recently and hear the whole story of the collection. And we talked about some of the crown jewels, the top cars in the collection. And they keep those in a section of the museum called the Grand Salon. By the way, we also did a full video for YouTube, which will be out later this week. So don't forget to subscribe to the Horsepower Heritage YouTube channel. And if you're planning a trip to the Los Angeles area, you absolutely have to visit the Nethercutt Collection. You can do general admission or you can book a guided tour, which is well worth it. So put that on your list and I'll have links in the show notes for you. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoy this episode. It's Cameron Richards of the Nethercutt Collection. And that's coming up right after this. Hi guys, Maurice Merrick here, and I want to let you know about 3 great scale models available right now at modelcitizendiecast.com. First, there's the pocket-size Lancia Stratos HF Stradale in 1/64th scale by Mini GT. Or how about a BMW 3.0 CS Coupe in 1/43rd scale by Mini Champs in your choice of 3 different colors. Or if American muscle is more your style, how about the 1968 Shelby GT500 convertible in great big 1/18th scale by Acme Trading Company. It's finished in Acapulco blue with white racing stripes, and boy oh boy, check out those mag wheels. You can find all of these and more at modelcitizendiecast.com. Use the promo code HERITAGE at checkout and get 10% off your order. Limitations apply. From race cars to street cars and everything in between, it's Model Citizen Diecast, because your inner child still wants to play with cars. Cameron, thanks for having us in.
Thanks for finally coming out here. I'm glad we got to get this going.
Absolutely, and I've been looking forward to it. And I know that, first of all, you're a pretty young guy to be in charge of what you do here. And this collection is one of the oldest, most prestigious in the country. But you were a little kid running around in this place.
Yeah, I still feel like a little kid when I'm here. I was fortunate enough, I am young, but I was born into it, so I don't try and take it for granted. But I do feel like a little kid running around with all these beautiful cars still. Now that I'm responsible for them, it's a little bit heavier than just, climbing in and out of cars, putting fingerprints on stuff. But it's been around since, it all started in 1956. The building we're in was completed in 71. It was purpose built for this, and just trying to keep it alive and well, make it better for the future generations.
What was it like being a kid around all these amazing cars?
It was awesome. It's just so awesome. And it's still awesome. I still get excited for taking these cars out to shows, and I still will sit in them and pretend I'm driving them because they're, can't take them out on the road right now. And, it was great as a child, and it clicked in my brain probably when I was around 6 or 7, when I realized that, I love cars already, but these in particular, these old pre-war cars are special, definitely rare and different and beautiful in every way.
So the collection was started by your great-grandfather, JB Nethercutt.
Yes.
And he wanted to collect the cars from his youth.
Right. So the cars behind me that are really old, some of them are over 100 years old in this room now. They were 20, 30 years old back then when he bought them. Most of them did fall into disrepair already, because back in the day, you would just buy a new car. In fact, a lot of people told my great-grandpa he was nuts for putting money into an old car when you could just go buy a modern one.
You bring up an interesting point, because even though these cars are essentially priceless now, and many of them are one of one, when he started collecting, they weren't worth a whole lot of money.
No, in fact, the first car he restored, he bought for $500, and it was just sitting behind a gas station in Santa Monica. He bought the SJ and Duesenberg. Those were the two cars that started it all. He paid $5,000 for that car, which was a lot of money, but at the end of the day, it was a 20-year-old car that fell into disrepair. And they've gone up in value quite a bit over the years.
Bit. Yeah. What was the car that he bought for $500?
The DuPont Model G town car. It's a 1930. It's what basically started it was his first restoration he did by himself back in 1958. And if my numbers are correct, he paid $500 for it and thought he could fix it up in 6 weeks for $5,000. It ended up taking 18 months and $65,000 back in 1958. But when he completed the restoration, him and my great-grandmother Dorothy hopped in it and drove it up to Monterey from Santa Monica and won Pebble Beach Best of Show. And from then it just turned into a passion, an obsession, a lifestyle. And it turned into having an entire car museum along with musical instruments.
So your great-granddad, he was one of the heavy hitters of car restoration and collecting at a time when there weren't that many people doing it. Like, it was him, it was Bill Harrah, a few others, Henry Austin Clark on the East Coast, but he was one of the heavy hitters.
Yeah, JB and Bill Harrah, they were actually really good friends. They bought and sold cars off each other constantly. In fact, we have some cars here that we've sold to Harrah twice and gotten back. And it was definitely a time that they were new to the hobby. They kind of helped create it, which turned into, Pebble Beach concourses around the world now. Just keeping the passion alive and trying to preserve the cars in the way that they should be preserved.
Right. And let's talk about this car that's between us. This is a great example of the collection in general, but also the coach built era. So this is the Duesenberg 20 grand, right?
Yes. So this is, right here in this row, we call it the heavy hitters, some of our, best cars. That's why we always put her right in the middle. The 20 grand is a very, very special car, and she is our crown jewel, at least one of our crown jewels. She was commissioned to be built for the 1933 Chicago World's Fair as a one-off body, Ralston coachwork. And it was so expensive in 1933 that nobody bought it. So they actually sat it for a year, painted it black, and sold it attempted to sell it again in 34.
So this car is called the 20 grand because that was the price in 1933.
Correct, which was well over $500,000, I believe, in today's
money.
It actually isn't the most expensive Duesenberg ever sold. Jay has that one, and that was 26,000 new. But she got that nickname 20 grand pretty early on. She's been campaigned. If she hasn't been to a show in every single state, she's definitely driven through every state in the U.S. She's been back and forth to Europe before. We've really, really shown her just about everywhere that we can over the years.
And every Duesenberg Model J and SJ were built in 1928, 29,
yes,
but it took
28.
a good 10 years for them to all be sold and get coach work.
Right. And what's crazy how I kind of understand it just because of the Great Depression and the coach work. So on top of that, I mean, you could get a Packard 12 for about a little under $8,000, but a chassis alone for a J or SJ was $7,000. So they were just so expensive compared to anything. But also you had the power ratio compared to anything else. The 20 grand makes 320 horsepower, which is still in today's terms great and
incredible.
She weighs a little under 8,000 pounds, but doesn't feel like it when you get on her. That supercharger, she'll scream and it'll get up and go. It just doesn't stop.
Right. The braking system on this car is still mechanical, right?
Yes. So, in fact, it has the like a computer, like a mechanical computer in it for different brake settings. It stops well.
Right.
Not great. Just, the coachwork bodies in these things are so heavy. There was no expense spared for metal, wood material, anything. It's all just solid.
Yeah, it's an amazing car, and it's one of the first true classics that I think I was aware of as a young man.
Oh, cool.
Because of that Franklin Mint model that they produced. And I thought this is a really odd looking car. And when I say odd, it's just very distinctive and unique. And obviously that's why they made a model of it, because it was so famous.
Yes. Jay himself actually said this is the most famous Duesenberg of all of them. And we like hearing him say stuff like that. There's actually a replica. There's a Duesenberg 2 built of one of these. I believe it's in Illinois. And it's very striking. My favorite thing about this car is because I've actually driven it on the streets in Nevada, Rhode Island, and the reactions that it gets from people isn't just people like in awe. It's hard to wrap your mind around it especially when you see it out on a road in sunlight where it's like, that's a car. That's a really big, pretty car, but it stands out. And JB was able to buy it in 1979. And the best thing about how great this restoration is and how well it's held up over the years was Gordon Burig, who initially designed the car, was still alive. So my great grandpa reached out to him and flew him out here to California to help restore the car because he still had the build sheets, the paint codes, everything. Because we knew that it was this platinum silver finish, but we couldn't figure out the color, but Gordon Burig still had it. So he was a huge help in putting this car back to her former glory in 33.
It's the kind of car that in the 30s, the original owner would have like lit his cigar with $100 bills.
Exactly. You know? Yeah. You'll get rocks thrown at you if you drove this in New York or Chicago back during the Depression. I mean, these were so expensive.
Yeah. At a time when unemployment was like 25%.
Yeah. People selling bread in the streets. I mean, it was a rough time. And part of this car museum is an example of what a Great Depression can do to an entire industry. There are so many wonderful cars just in this room alone that were just killed off. Packard, I don't think they ever really recovered from the Depression, and we just try and keep the ones that are still remaining out and alive. And
yeah, Packard came out with a more affordable line in the late 30s in an attempt to increase their sales. And they never really got back to their former glory after World War II.
No, they really didn't. I think the only American luxury vehicle that survived was Cadillac, and that's just because they had the GM funding. Unfortunately, Packard, Duesenberg, they're all gone. And
yeah, it's a shame, but you have some amazing examples of their best right here. This collection was built by one man in his lifetime, and he was a self-made man. I want to talk a little bit more about who JB Nethercutt was and who Merle Norman was. So Merle started the cosmetics line basically in her kitchen in Santa Monica.
Yeah, she just during the Depression just started mixing stuff and started selling it to her friends. Later turned into selling it around town, and we actually still have her delivery car. It's a 1927 Star. That's downstairs, and
that's from the Durant Motors line.
Yes,
yeah,
yes, and tiny little car, but that's what started it for Merle, and we are happy to still have it here in the museum. JB got involved heavily in the 50s and co-founded, because Merle Norman started in 1931 originally, and he took over after Merle passed in the 70s. But JB was just a young kid from Indiana. He grew up in Santa Monica when he moved out to live with Merle, met his wife, Dorothy. They were married for 71 years and passed away a couple months apart. And as the story goes, this room that we're in, we call it the Grand Salon. And this is totally purpose-built to emulate what a high-end automotive dealership showroom floor would look like from the teens, 20s, and 30s. And JB and Dorothy, right around the time they got married, they would stick their heads through the windows of these invite-only private events where Duesenbergs, Packards, Mercedes, all these high-end vehicles were unveiled to the public for the first time. You know, they didn't have any money to get into a black tie event. So with success in the cosmetic industry, this is what he spent his entire life on. This is his hobby, his passion. And it is crazy because I do say that those exact words. This was all acquired by one man in one lifetime, which blows me away.
It is incredible. And JB was Merle's nephew.
Yes.
And he was like her first delivery boy, right? Like he would go door to door selling the cosmetics too.
Yeah, and we've all had our fair share of, I'm much more on the car side, but, we've all mopped floors or carried boxes at a certain point. My grandpa, he took over Merle in 2004, he started by mopping floors. They made him be a janitor first. So it's, I guess, tough love sometimes.
Yeah. No, it's a really great example of the American dream and what someone can achieve with hard work and determination and just a great product that people want.
Yeah, I use their skincare stuff. It's pretty good.
That's cool.
I mean, I'm a little biased, but it's it's good stuff.
By the way, you mentioned Gordon Burig because he was the designer of the 20 grand, but he also was the designer of the Cord 812, which is an amazing car, the coffin nose Cord, as we like to say.
Yeah, I love those.
Yeah, and you've got one here in the collection.
Yeah, right behind me.
Yeah, tell us about that car.
That car was very misunderstood. There was a lot of firsts for it. Clamshell hideaway headlights was one. Like you said, the coffin nose. I think that's why people really hated it. It was just a quick glance at it. It was so odd looking. The 812s were so ahead of their time, and I think that's why people love them now and hated them when they were new.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a polarizing design. And it's almost like, the Chrysler Airflows. They were ahead of their time too. Yeah. But the streamlining is fantastic. It is Art Deco. And like all Cords, it's front wheel drive.
Right. Yeah, it was, we have an L29 Cord. That front wheel drive system works a lot better than the Ruxton we have. It's kind of fun to compare the two, see why the L29s came to fruition and the Ruxtons, well, for a number of reasons, didn't. But yeah, front wheel drive was a big deal back then. That was like, the future.
It was. And Cord and Miller Racing Cars, those were the two that really stood out and proved the concept. Have you ever seen a Christie front drive?
We have one across the street.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's we cosmetically restored it. In fact, we used to have a lot more steam cars, and our shop guys got tired of working on them because, they idle at about 1,000 degrees and they
Right.
tend to explode. So we never got her up and running, I don't believe. But yeah, those are fascinating machines.
Yeah, they're really interesting. And there was a Christie racing car that
Oh, really?
the entire engine and drivetrain were in the front. So it sat transverse.
Okay.
The crank was the front wheel drive.
Oh, so sort of like a V-drive, kind of like a boat's V-drive, or am I backwards on that?
You know, I'll have to show you a picture because
Yeah, I
this is
wanna see
the
that.
weirdest thing. But yeah, Christie did some odd stuff. All right, so we got to talk about the Bugatti Type 51 Dubos Coupe.
Definitely. That's my favorite car to talk about. We do a 2-hour private guided tour here, and I could probably talk about that car for 2 hours straight. The history and the story behind it is insane. Recently wrote a book called Faster by Neil Bascom, and it's a wonderful story about how two Jewish French race car drivers helped defeat the auto union and Hitler's best. And those two of the drivers were Louis Chiron and Rene Dreyfus. And Louis Chiron originally owned that racing chassis, and Rene Dreyfus raced it as well. He actually crashed it in Monaco. And the book talks about that car in particular for a second. But as the story goes, it was the original Grand Prix racing car, raced by Chiron and Dreyfus. After about 5 or 6 seasons, she was retired, and a man named Andre Bith bought it. And he wanted basically an Atlantique, but race car version. He was a playboy living in Europe, and he claimed to actually have over 1,000 female passengers in the car when he owned it, up until 58. And when he sold it in 58, the guy who bought it actually took the Dubos Coupe body off. That was one of one coach built for Andre Bith, and put a replica race body on the chassis. And then he ended up selling that in 1959 to JB, my great grandpa. And that was displayed here in the Grand Salon for years and years until the year 2000, when there was a Bugatti Coupe body up for sale. And we looked and we're like, oh my God, it's that rumored long lost Dubos body. So JB bought it and remarried it. It was actually, believe it or not, a really difficult restoration to put a chassis and a body that used to be together back together. But after almost 50 years, it got remarried, and it still is a race car. It's got a 2.3 liter inline 8 with a supercharger. It makes 200 horsepower on alcohol, 185 normally. It is loud. It pings. It pops. It's got a crash box. I have to drive it barefoot. I have relatively big feet. However, I think one person has driven that car with actual legit racing shoes, and that was my grandpa. And the pedal box is, no kidding, this wide. That's it. So
About a foot.
it's smaller.
Yeah.
And it is just so tight in there. And we did an episode with Jay in it, and it's so funny to me because our shoulders are on top of each other. So we're so close, but we're screaming in each other's ear because you get that supercharger wound up and the straight cut gears screaming away. It's exhilarating to drive, but it also terrifies me because of how much the estimated value is, it being the only one of its kind ever.
And it also has mechanical brakes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't stop too good. I mean, nothing really in here does, but it's fun to compare stuff, antiques from the teens where it's like, oh, it stops great. It stops way better than a Packard does. And
yeah,
this is how it is.
And we should mention it's called the Dubos Coupe because it was the coach work was done by the Dubos brothers in Paris.
Yes, Louis Dubos.
Is it Dubos or Dubos?
It's either or. I'm not sure. We can go to France and ask. That car, I don't even know like how that car survived really, because I mean, it was in France during World War II. I have no idea where it was kept. And we have pictures of it, doing rallies throughout Europe. I wish it had an odometer. I'd really love to know what that car has seen in a lifetime. And it's just so beautiful. It's so elegant, but I wish we could still take it out on rallies, but it's so priceless now,
right,
where it's better just to put around at shows. And
Well, I mean, the coachwork is incredible. It is so tightly wrapped around the chassis, and it fools people. People think it's a luxury sports car of the 30s. They don't realize it's a race car under the skin.
Right. It is totally a repurposed race car, and we gear everything how it's supposed to be geared. So that thing will still track, but what we get a lot when people come to, a lot of people come specifically to see the 20 grand, to see the Dubos Coupe, in particular, but a lot of people, once they stand in front of it, they go, it's small. Like, yeah, we have a picture of what, the original Grand Prix body. It's like, yeah, it's a tiny little race car.
Right.
And they built this beautiful streamlined body around it.
Yeah. It's just beautiful to look at. And by the way, any of these cars, I could pretty much just sit down and stare at them for hours and just kind of move my chair around every so often and admire them. And that's true of everything in here.
Yeah. When you said, what's it like growing up being a kid here? That's why I still feel like a kid, that just staring at these cars I've known my whole life. As long as I can remember, I've been around these things, and they just never get old, just to study every nook and cranny of them.
When you were really little, would you climb in and sit behind the wheel and pretend you were driving?
All the time. Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
And I apologize to any of our detail guys over the years with the fingerprints and the foot marks, and I still like to do that.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I would too. Let's talk about what it takes to keep this place in ship shape. I mean, I've got a few cars, and I know how much work it is to just keep them up, but this is on a completely different level.
Yeah, it's, this place is my biggest stressor, and I constantly worry about it because I care about it so much. I have a small team, but I have the best team in my opinion in the world. Small restoration shop these days is not, we had a 30-man team back in the heyday. You have to have security to keep the place safe, detailers to keep the cars clean. It sometimes can be a lot to handle. You saw Kenny downstairs just filling up tires. Tires get low from sitting, and it's a lot to maintain to make this place so pretty. But I love when people come and visit. They say, "Oh, it's so clean here," and it's like, "Oh, thanks. We're trying to keep it clean." And
yeah, that was his project this morning. He was just going from car to car, checking tire pressures and topping them off. And you guys use nitrogen.
Yeah, that helps maintain them. And, so back in the day when we would give tours, and it was completely true, it's each car is at least driven and serviced once a year. That used to be true. However, JB did not stop buying cars until he passed in 2004. So we have about 280 cars total here. So they don't get out every year like they used to. The 20 grand gets out at least once a year. The Dubos gets out at least once a year. The cars in here, we try and keep them as happy as possible. But there are some cars that have been sitting for a while. It just got too much, and we pickle them now. So back in the day, they used to be all on trickle chargers, and we have these things called diapers we put under the cars because, they leak.
Sure.
But we were just trying to keep it a little bit more maintainable, which has turned it a little bit more into a museum where these cars will sit for 3 to 5 years until we take them out again. But that's all just, trying to keep it managed and keeping the stress off my guys here. Cause yeah, we have to fill tires. We have to wipe them down every day. And
well, listen, I am willing to make the sacrifice.
Oh, perfect.
If you need somebody to exercise a car from time to time, you've got my number. I mean,
I'll keep you in mind. We used to do these things called a picnic. This was back when JB was still around, and we would pull 60 cars out at a time. And I went on one when I was a baby. I remember it was actually in the 812 Cord. My dad driving me, my brothers were wrestling in the back seat, but I wasn't a baby, but I was young, and we'd pull 60 cars out at a time. It'd be Merle Norman cosmetic employees, friends, family of JB and Dorothy. And I mean, you could never driven a car of the era at all. And they just go, "Hey, can you drive stick?" all right, here's a crash course. And they drive up to Fraser Park and, you know, the cars would come back like completely overheated, clutches completely smoked. Like, but JB didn't care. He wanted the people that he cared about to experience what he gets to experience all the time. And that could never be done today.
Right.
We don't have the manpower to pull 60 cars out at a time, but I do have pictures and, you know, stories that I've heard of the good old days when that used to be a thing.
How wonderful. And just in case people aren't familiar with the Los Angeles area, we're in the San Fernando Valley, kind of on the northern reaches of the valley here in Sylmar. And Fraser Park is essentially up Interstate 5 in the mountains before you get to Bakersfield.
Yeah, I mean, these cars would get exercised. And we have some veterans of our own here, cars that would do every single tour because they were, you know, usually really reliable, or it wasn't too difficult to drive. 20 grand did it a ton of times. That car has done 120 miles an hour on the 5 before, long before I was born, but
incredible.
Everyone loves to talk about their stories. Everyone has a story about getting on the 20 grand and how fast it gets up. And I have my own stories of that too, but they are fun to drive and fun to drive how, you know, these were all daily drivers at some point. They shouldn't be treated like park in the street, but you could still drive them the way they want to be driven.
Right. Particularly these higher end cars of the era are still capable of keeping up in modern traffic.
Oh, definitely. Duesenbergs, especially the SJs, 80 miles an hour highway, no problem. We took the Ruxton to La Jolla. That makes 100 horsepower off a L-head 8. And I got up to 55 on the highway. I was a little worried, but they can sort of keep up. But Packards, Duesenbergs, those things, I mean, you could still drive them around every day.
Yeah. That's another aspect of the collection we should touch on, which is that JB liked luxury cars. He wasn't so much into sports cars. He liked the big luxury stuff. And he also liked orphan brands, stuff that disappeared after the late 20s and early 30s.
Yeah, we've got cars that, you know, I don't know everything here yet. And most of my free time is spent reading an Excel sheet I made of everything that took a few years to put together. But, yeah, we have a Gardner, a Diana,
a Moon.
We have 2 Moons, Kissel. They're actually built in the same production line.
You have several Franklins, I see.
Yeah, we have a lot of Franklins. Franklins are great. It's just all stuff that, yeah, I guess Orphan Cars is a great name. Stuff that just died off quick, whether it was the Great Depression or no funding. We have a Cameron. Yeah, we've got a lot of Pierce Arrows. Got 18 of those. JB loved American and European luxury. We do have a Ferrari. However, that was, apparently he had to get his arm twisted to buy it because it was all about the big luxury cars for JB.
What model Ferrari?
It's a 365 California Spider, 1967.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll show you when we walk through the shop later. She's a pretty girl.
Nice. I stepped on you a second ago, but you mentioned the Cameron, which is like a little jitney downstairs.
Yeah, a little 1904 Cameron Experimental. I obviously loved it growing up as a little kid because it was my name, but just a little, I think top speed 8 miles an hour car. Rickety little, you know, wood spoke, wood fender, tiny little beautiful car. And, as I've gotten older, I love the brass and nickel era. They are so fun to drive. They're fun to learn how to operate because you could just street park it anywhere. Nobody's going to steal it. We did that with our DD-own recently. I just left it running out in front of the museum for like 20 minutes. I knew it would be fine.
That's really cool. Cameron, you said to me earlier before we started rolling that you were not like the greatest student growing up, but there was something about the cars that lit a fire in you.
Yeah, and I had a wonderful conversation with Jay. It was on camera, but it didn't make one of our episodes we did with him because Jay's been open about being dyslexic. And I was telling him that, you know, I was diagnosed with like ADHD and dyslexia growing up. And he goes, oh yeah, me too. And he goes, well, if you find something that you're interested in, it turns into a superpower. Cause my parents were always annoyed that I could never do that well in school, but I can remember how many cubic inches a Duesenberg straight 8 is, or how much horsepower a Ford Mustang has from 1967. And that was just, I guess, my unlocking. And then, I went to college, figured out that, if I just pretend it's about cars, I can, get my mind through it, I suppose. But it's definitely the easiest thing for me to understand. And my girlfriend will also tell you that I never shut up about cars ever. It's just my thing.
It's how you relate to the world around you.
Definitely. I guess it's my language, or at least, yeah.
Me too. It's not my own. I mean, I have a lot more interest in life, and I'm sure you do too. We talked about how you're an avid snowboarder, and you're a musician, you're a pianist. I mean,
barely, but yeah.
So, you're a multifaceted person too, but cars, there's something about it. You just can't get it out of your head. And every day I'm thinking about cars.
Yeah. All day, every day. And I'm, we have like a joke, squirrel, because anytime I see a car that I like, it's whatever conversation I'm in, I'm out of it immediately. Oh, check that out. And dogs, because I love animals too. So if I see a dog, like a cute bulldog or something, I'm just going to leave the conversation we're in and go pet it. But there's a, sweet car ride driving down the road, same thing. Just,
I know you've had this experience when you're like with a few friends that aren't necessarily into cars, and you start to go off about some trivia, and you see their eyes glaze over, and you realize I look like a complete nerd right now, and I should just shut up.
Yeah, big time. I think I realized like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago that I am a nerd when it comes to this stuff, so I might as well just embrace it.
But that's why we have the circle of friends we have, right? It's because we share all this.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that's why I listen to this show, because I love it. And
thank you.
I mean, I listen to stuff that I want to learn more about. It's like the pursuit of knowledge.
I bet you could spend, I don't know, a month studying each of the cars in here, and you just wouldn't make it. You would die before you ended up like absorbing all the. Does that make sense? Like,
oh yeah,
you're never going to stop learning.
Right. I mean, every time I'm here, which is practically every day, I mean, I there's so much to soak in, and it is impossible to learn everything about everything in here. I mean, we have a music room with these big orchestrions and pianos, and all the cars still run and drive, and all the musical instruments play themselves. And the reason why the instruments play themselves is my great-grandparents absolutely loved music, but they really weren't musicians. I think Dorothy played a little piano, but they loved to entertain as well. So in the music room, they'd have dinners and friends and family, and they'd play the theater pipe organ and the orchestrions and just dance and enjoy the old-timey music.
All right, so there's two cars here that are incredibly imposing and like regal. And one is this Rolls-Royce town car, and the other is this Maybach Zeppelin. They're of the same era. They're very different in certain ways, but I would love to hear more about each of the cars. Let's talk about the Rolls.
Sure. So the Rolls, we call her the Constance Bennett. Constance Bennett was the second owner. She actually bought it as a used car at the New York Auto Spa.
And she was a Hollywood actress.
Yeah, she was the highest paid actor, not just actress, in Hollywood for about, I think, like almost 20 years. Beautiful woman, and it's a beautiful car, so it's fitting. She saw it at the New York Auto Spa and fell in love with it and paid $17,000 for it. It was originally $23,000 new. It's a Brewster body, so as the numbers go, it's a 1930 Phantom 2. So they built 1,681 Phantoms in total, Phantom 2s, and they only had 25 of them bodied by Brewster, and this is the only town car version. It has the caning on the hand-laid paint, which, I mean, there's probably 50 people alive in the world that can still do that type of amazing artwork. And the car was her main chauffeur. I mean, she was driven around. There's pictures of her next to it in front of her Beverly Hills home, and Had a bunch of roles in old Hollywood. In fact, this car made $250 a day, which was more than the average actor. And she just loved the car and loved bringing it to movie studios. Had a starring role in A King of the Chorus Girl. And she had it up until 1948, until her husband lost it in a poker game. And then they got divorced in 1949. So that's the story of our Constance Bennett Rolls. And she's just delightful to drive, beautiful, screams Art Deco car. But its probably biggest competitor is the Maybach that you mentioned. That's a 1932 Maybach Zeppelin DS8 Cabriolet. They built about 200 of them, and I am not sure how many are left. I think it's in the single digits. Name for Zeppelin is Ferdinand von Zeppelin of airship fame, designed the engines. This car was originally owned by the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, and actually before the Nazis really started being Nazis, they sold it to a Polish diplomat. And then when World War II really broke out and Germany started invading, they actually put that car on a list to be hunted and found and brought back to Germany. Fortunately, the Nazis were not smart enough, and JB found it in a barn in Poland in 1968. It was all covered up, and I could talk about this now because it's statute of limitations. Everyone involved is now deceased. He legally purchased the car, but because the Iron Curtain could not remove it from Europe, so the car was then in the middle of the night put on a flatbed and
liberated.
As the story goes, the truck was averaging over 100 miles an hour to get it to England so it could be shipped here to LA. And we've had it since 1968. We've restored it twice, actually. It's a big, beautiful car. It weighs about 8,000 pounds, has a high and a low gear, free select transmission. Technically, it's an 8-speed. It is a funky car. It's a 8-liter V12 and spawn body. It's just beautiful. And we love to tell the story about how the Nazis were too dumb to find it, and we did.
And Wilhelm Maybach was one of the early German automotive pioneers, along with Nicholas Otto, who basically devised the 4-stroke engine, right? And Carl Benz.
Yeah, just a bunch of geniuses. And unfortunately, what their country ended up doing was a horrible thing. But I actually talk about this because we have a 540K that's just a beautiful car down in the shop right now, and along with the Maybach. You know, when the Third Reich started doing what they were doing, countries because people didn't really know what was going on when it was going on. So it's like, well, Germany's trying to take over the world. Well, look at all the fancy stuff that's coming out of that country. I mean, I see why people back then would have maybe just for a second listened, because this car is just, the engineering behind it is amazing. All the dials inside on the dash, and just the transmission obviously never really came to fruition, but I mean, this thing it's just so bulletproof.
Yeah, it's incredible. And Spahn was one of the premier German coach builders, and I think they survived into the 1960s.
Oh, I'm not sure about that one.
Yeah. I mean, they were building stuff that was a shadow of what they had built.
Sure.
But I know post-war they built some very unusual, like one-off stuff. Cameron, let's talk a little bit more about the engine in this car.
It's a 8-liter V12, and they call it a Zeppelin engine because Ferdinand von Zeppelin designed it, and that's the engines that powered the airships. So they're pretty powerful, just the amount of low-end torque on these. I mean, any V12, but pulls right away. And the interesting thing about this car in particular is you only have to use the clutch on the initial start, and if you're coming to a complete stop. Other than that, it's pre-select dials on the steering wheel that is how you shift it, and it won't go into gear until you take your foot off the gas. It's funky, but the car kind of just drives itself, and I wish it would steer itself because it's a workout how heavy that front end is with that big V12, but just a really, really impressive German engineering.
Now, it's right-hand drive, which is unusual. Do you know the reason behind that?
I would assume that it was because it was reserved for German Air Force officers. So we have a Isotta Fraschini as well that even though it was imported originally to the U.S., they kept the steering wheel on the right so the chauffeur could get right out and open the door for whoever was riding.
Makes sense.
So I would probably assume that would be why.
I mean, that's true of the Rolls town car as well. It's right-hand drive, a chauffeur-driven car.
Yeah, and they wouldn't flip them over just because, I mean, the movie that the Rolls was in actually shows a guy just climbs right out super fast and opens the door for his passenger.
Right. So there's a really flashy Packard here behind me, and it's unusual even among coach-built Packards.
Right. So that is one of 6 built and 4 left. That's a Packard 12, but with a LeBaron body. I actually just saw Lions has one. It's a boat tail. It's blue. Saw it in La Jolla recently, and they're just beautiful. The LeBaron body styles. Dietrich was great for those Packard 12s, but LeBaron really had that sport Phaeton finish that really completed these.
The disappearing top is magic, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It just cleans the entire car up so much. It really took some doing to get those tops to disappear that way.
Oh, yeah. Right. And we almost never put the tops up. I mean, the coach work was mainly designed for, to be disappearing. So,
Right. We should talk about driving these cars because it has to be really gratifying to be able to get behind the wheel of one of these cars and feel how it was back in the day.
When I took the Bugatti Dubos to Scottsdale a couple years ago, I got to drive it through Old Town Scottsdale on like a Saturday afternoon, and the weather was beautiful and that thing's so loud. So just to get the reactions is my favorite thing. The 20 grand, obviously the head turners. Although we took a 1909 Packard Runabout, that is one of my personal favorites. It's a 3-speed with a transaxle, T-head engine. And that thing, I mean, it's got a center throttle. So double clutching it is really fun because your feet are just right there. And, I mean, we got it up to about 60, 65 miles an hour out in the street, no hood, no windshield, nothing. So it's like you're riding a motorcycle, and, it just to drive them in general, I just get a thrill out of. We took a 1912 DD-own, and a cop pulled up and basically was just like, "What is this thing? How fast does it go? And is it registered?" And it's just the people around Sylmar. I'd figured they'd be a little more used to seeing these cars since we've been here for so long, but the reactions are the best. I fortunately haven't had any moments. Gotten close. We drove the 20 grand across Vegas and back for a show a couple years ago, and it was a little nerve wracking, but we drove through a tunnel, and Duesenbergs have exhaust cutouts, so when in Rome.
Of course. How could you not?
Exactly.
Well, that is one of the things that's a little bit risky taking these cars out is people tend to stare and maybe get too close and like kind of shadow you. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, people want to, I'm a culprit too. If I see a car like on the highway, I'm going to speed up to get closer to it. But when these cars are just so rare and they don't stop well, that's the scariest part. We took the Ferrari out, and that's, 1967 technology, and the guy ran a red light, and I just got lucky. It didn't get clipped, but, I always say, read the room. If someone's getting too close or cuts me off in a car that's almost 100 years old, it's like, hey, I can't stop or move like you can. So,
yeah, they steer like a boat.
Yeah,
they stop like a train.
That's right.
And you have to keep a cushion between you and the traffic ahead. But today's drivers, they will fill that gap every time.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if they have a newer car, it's like, oh, it stops for me or whatever. And I don't trust any of that technology. It's nice if we have like a chase truck, we have a parts van, or we'll pull out the big diesel truck we have just to protect it in case, God forbid.
Have you thought about the fact that you're probably the youngest guy around that's had the opportunity to drive such a wide variety of these incredible old machines.
Yeah, I'm the luckiest person I know, and
you said that earlier.
I know. I will say it for the rest of my life. Every time I'm in these cars, it's just like, man, it's just so cool. And we took the Packard for road testing not too long ago. It's like such a peaceful car to drive, and the whole time, like, I'm just so lucky. I feel like Clark Gable right now, just cruising down the street in a Packard 12, and just to get to know how these things work and really get to drive them down the road is just such an experience that I will never get tired of.
By the way, I have to say I've really enjoyed the videos that you've been doing with Jay, taking the cars from the collection over to him and letting him drive. And he really listens to you. You guys are like peas in a pod, and it's really fun to watch you guys together.
Well, thank you very much for that. The first couple times I was so nervous, and I've had a lot of fun. Jay has an amazing crew, and Jay is my true hero, what he does. And it has been a lot more fun to go. We've done 9 episodes, so every time I'd go back after the first one, I'd be a little less nervous. And now it's just like, I can't. Like, I'm so excited to do them anytime, and learned a lot off of him, and had a lot of fun just hanging out with him in between filming and stuff. It's just the coolest place over there, and Jay is the coolest guy ever.
How awesome is it that you're just a few miles apart too?
Yeah, we're about 8 miles from each other. So it is nice. We can, just drive a car over, and we just got a C2 Corvette. So I just drove it over. It's like, hey, look what we just got. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's been truly a dream come true, coming from, just being a kid watching that YouTube channel start to being able to film, not only just to get to meet him and to get the experience, but also he's been a tremendous help on getting our name out to a newer audience. And I can't thank him and his crew enough for that. And you as well, of course.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to seeing your YouTube channel grow. And I know you've got some plans in that vein. And we should tell people about your socials. And I also want you to let folks know if they want to come visit here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, we're on Instagram and Facebook, just the Nethercutt Collection. We have a new website where you could book a tour. General admission's $5 for the museum side, and a private tour, usually is guided by me, is $20. All the money goes to keeping this place alive, keeping the cars clean and running and happy. We are starting a YouTube channel. We have filmed a couple videos now. We're going to start slow, work our way up. It's just me. So if you don't like my voice listening to it now, I apologize in advance because nobody else is here to help. So, things are going well, and I'm really excited for the future of this place. Just trying to, keep it up in the 21st century, keep things going, and really just keep the memory of how this all started and keep the memories of these cars alive.
It is well worth a visit. That $20 for the private tour, that's a bargain. That's the best $20 a car guy will spend.
Yeah, I get that a lot, which, it's not about making money. It's just about making enough where I could afford to keep the lights on, keep my employees happy and paid. And
yeah, it's a lot of work, and it's great that you have a dedicated team. I met some of your guys downstairs. They clearly love what they do.
Yeah, we all love it here. This is, like I said earlier, this is my happy place, and I spend a lot of time here.
Well, listen, Cameron, thank you so much for having me in today. Let's walk around downstairs and check out some of the other cars.
Let's I got a lot to show you still. So thank you, Maurice. This has been a great opportunity and a really, really fun time.
Thanks, my friend. I appreciate it.
That's all for this episode of Horsepower Heritage. If you like what you've heard, share the show with your friends and become a patron at buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage. You can contribute as little as $2 or a larger amount of your choice, and you can make that a one-time gift or a recurring gift if you like. Thanks to everyone who's already contributed. And I will see you back here on Wednesday, October 9th for more of the people and stories behind the machines. So until then, I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for listening.